Hi, so we're looking at the video of James Max interviewing Debbie Hayton on TalkRADIO on the 30th of December 2021.
But then, why has this become so toxic that we can't have a proper conversation without people being called out? And all the stuff that has arrived at me on the old Twitter is just horrendous.
Well, it's what those actors were saying. It seems to me they're trying to protect their own backs. They didn't want happening to them what's happened to J.K. Rowling, i.e. being cancelled, being disinvited, having awards taken back from them. This is what's been happening, and I can quite understand why youngish actors are trying to protect themselves. But what they're saying is nonsense. Women are female, trans women are male. Male is not female. We are different. And to deny that is to deny reality. And this is what we've been trying to do, and this is why we've got a problem.
So trans people in the UK, though, they do face a huge level of abuse and inequality. And I guess what I was talking about with Kelly J yesterday is that if you take her views and you move away from what she was telling me on air, if you move to what she's said and has been quoted as saying and is filmed as saying off air but on YouTube, she doesn't seem to agree with any aspect of trans at all.
Well, Max is making an appeal to Dr. Hayton here that they kind of team up together and denounce this woman, Kelly Jo Keane, for statements which they are not defining and which they are not repeating. So it's very, very difficult to find out what it is that we're actually being asked to form an opinion on. And I have not watched every broadcast that Kelly Jo Keane has made. I have probably not seen every media appearance that she's made because she's an absolute gift to the broadcast media. But I've never seen her say anything that I wouldn't be prepared to defend on her behalf. And she doesn't require any of us to defend it on her behalf. If you've got a problem with something that Kelly Jo Keane has said, the best person to ask about it is Kelly Jo Keane. What would Dr. Hayton know about it?
If you move to what she's said and has been quoted as saying and is filmed as saying off air but on YouTube, she doesn't seem to agree with any aspect of trans at all.
Well, look, you had Kelly J on yesterday and she could speak for herself.
I would actually like to thank Dr. Hayton for pointing out that Kelly Jo Keane is able to speak for herself. That is appreciated.
But I want to go back to what I think, which is that we need to refine trans rights in reality, and then we can perhaps get somewhere. I do take issue, actually, what you said about trans people facing oppression and marginalisation in British society. I don't think we do. I think we suffer in the same way that other people do, but we have huge rights. We've got the same rights as everybody else, and a few more besides. This idea that we face extra pressure and oppression, it's not my experience at all, and it's not the experience of trans friends of mine.
What about 2 in 5 trans young people who have attempted suicide, and 1 in 8 trans people have been physically attacked by colleagues or customers at work? That's a fact.
Okay, I found the source of this statistic, and in fact it is from a fact sheet that was supplied by Stonewall. I followed the statistics to their source, and these are not reliable statistics that this man is repeating on air as if they are established fact.
Do you have the source for that information? Most of it comes from self-reported uncontrolled studies, James.
Okay.
Absolutely right, Dr. Hayton. You're right to call him on it. We can't be accepting this anti-science viewpoint where we're not literate enough to understand that not every statistic is meaningful.
Okay, so as somebody who is not connected to this, so I'm trying to navigate my way through this without either offending or upsetting, but also trying to understand, well, what is the best way to respond to this? Because
so my question is, what political issue is it possible to navigate your way through without offending or upsetting somebody during that process? Because I'm thinking about other political issues here. So the £20 universal credit uplift, which was an absolute godsend to a lot of people on benefits during lockdown. The debate about whether or not to extend that or whether to withdraw it. You know, there's a lot of offensive and upsetting things said in that debate. Why Why are we allowed to have that debate, but we're not allowed to have this debate? You know?
Either offending or upsetting, but also trying to understand, well, what is the best way to respond to this? Because my problem is that as soon as I speak, I'm told that I'm middle class, white, and a bloke. So what do I know? And therefore, I can't enter the conversation. And then if you have a...
Okay, no one's saying that middle-aged white men can't enter the conversation. Of course they can. You're free to enter whichever conversation you please. What we're saying is that a middle-aged white man is never going to have the expertise that accrues in a lifetime of being female in this world. And therefore, in issues relating to feminism, it is not the place of men to adjudicate between feminists or to define feminism or to speak on broadcast media in defence of feminism, because that is a role which is exclusively a role for women. So whereas men, you can enter this debate if you please, but really you are going to get pushback from women if you start saying things that we interpret as being trying to teach us about feminism, because that's never going to go down well. But by all means enter the debate. Particularly it would be great for you to talk to your friends about it, because men tend to listen to other men more than they listen to women. So that would be great, thanks.
And then if you have a look at the timeline here, I'm told what female or what women have, which I'm well aware of, but apparently, you know, a woman is a woman and that's it. And there is no further debate or discussion. But that seems not to be the case, because if you speak to anybody under the age of 35, they'll have a completely different view.
Because of the institutional capture that we discussed earlier, a lot of people that are under the age of 35 are of a cohort of young people who have been indoctrinated through the schools, through the universities and through the professions. And as a result, there are a lot of young people that are enthralled to this gender ideology and have been deliberately, feminist analysis and class analysis has been deliberately hidden from this cohort of people. So I don't think that always it's the case that because a group of people that are young believe something, that everybody that's older than that should change their beliefs. Because sometimes it's true that wisdom increases as we age, and perhaps that there are things that we can learn as teenagers and young adults from individuals who are older, who may have charge of the younger generation, who may have caring responsibilities for the older generation, who have more life experience in general, and perhaps more aware of the secondary implications, or, what's the word? That thing where it's an unwanted outcome that happens. Those things. I've got brain fog suddenly.
Well, lots of people have got different views, but there's one reality and one truth.
Absolutely. And that famous saying, reality doesn't care about your feelings. I'm afraid it's true.
And a woman is a woman. A woman's an adult human female. That's the way we've always defined it. And that's the only definition of woman that doesn't involve sexist stereotypes or circular reasoning.
Available from Kelly J. Keen's shop.
That's the way we've always defined it, and that's the only definition of woman that doesn't involve sexist stereotypes or circular reasoning. People can believe what they like, but it's when we start trying to base rights on beliefs, that's when we've ended up with a problem.
So is everything okay? So is everything fine? Okay, so is everything that is then written about in terms of trans rights and what we should be doing and how we should be referring to people and the names or the gender assignation and various other things, is all of that wrong advice?
Well, people should be free to think and say what they like. The problem is that people don't feel free to say what they like, or else you can imagine that.
Well, they're clearly not, because if you have a look at what's the stuff that's been aimed at me, I'm not free to say what I like and what.
I am working on a video on free speech, because I think it's an important issue that we don't talk about enough. But what James Max is saying here is an impediment to his free speech is people disagreeing with him. And unfortunately, that isn't an impediment to free speech. It's an inevitable consequence of free speech, is that some people will agree with you and some people will disagree with you. And the more public your speech is and the more you broadcast that speech to a wider audience, the more chances there are that you'll encounter both people that agree and people that disagree with your opinions, and that's okay. What are impediments to free speech are when we face professional consequences or social consequences for saying things which are legally allowed, which are acceptable beliefs to hold. And this can happen in any group of people who believe that membership of that group means a tight control over the ideology of members. And personally, it's not something that I think is helpful. But certainly, you know, what the treatment of Kathleen Stock, that's an example of where her free speech was impeded by the harassment campaign that was launched against her. Other women who've been subject to similar campaigns, Rachel Rooney, Jo Phoenix, Maya Forstater, of course, Kate Scotto, you know, there are legion. And those are actual consequences that are an impediment to free speech. Being arrested, losing your job, losing work, having whispers in professional circles that prevent people from supporting you publicly, a lack of support from your union in workplace disputes. These are all consequences that impede free speech, and these are the consequences that we do not wish to see.
I'm not free to say what I like and what I feel. And the thing is that as somebody who looks at this from the protection of a minority, just because a majority thinks something, it doesn't necessarily mean that the minority doesn't need to be protected. Now, you're telling me that as a trans person, no thanks, I don't need help from you, and that's fine by me. But there are a lot of people who might not necessarily agree with your view, I'm assuming.
But we need to base rights, as I keep going back to this, we need to base rights on reality and truth. So trans people need to be protected, but we don't need to be protected by an ideology that just isn't true, that says people can choose to be the sex they want to be. That ideology has damaged women's rights. It's also compromised the safeguarding of children, which is a completely separate argument.
This man's got a nerve to talk about the safeguarding of children when he is somebody who has instituted instructions that female pupils have to refer to him using feminine pronouns, that his female colleagues have to share facilities with him, etc. All of that was in the union guidance, which Dr Hayton was very involved in creating some years ago. I would be really interested to know if Dr Hayton now renounces those opinions and what steps he is making in order to rectify the errors which have become institutionalised in his workplace and in his union as a result of his activism.
That's what we've been discussing here. And together they've caused people to lose confidence in the entire system, and that's why we've ended up with the mess that we're in.
But then we also end up in a mess when a lot of the tropes that we used to describe gay people back in 60s, 70s, 80s, whatever it was, are still being used by some about those who are trans. I'm assuming that there are trans people, well, we know there are, but there are trans people who, for whatever reason, will, or whatever feelings they may have, or however one wants to define it, there are trans people in society, and we've got to find a better way to deal with it, rather than just accusing anybody of, you know, anybody who perhaps dresses in a certain way as being a transvestite and having some kind of perversion.
Okay, I have a problem with this. The tropes that we used back in the 60s and 70s that he's talking about, I'm assuming he's talking about insinuations that gay people were interested sexually in children, for instance. Now, as far as I'm aware, there is no correlation between being gay and paedophilia or sexual offending against children. I'm not aware of any link between those two things, and the gay community has been really, really clear that we do not accept any linking of those very different ideas. Now, the problem that we've got is that cross-dressing, transvestic fetishism, as it was called in the DSM, has been associated as a paraphilia with several other paraphilias, one of which is paedophilia. So we're talking about a group of people that does include a higher proportion than an equivalent cohort of people that do not share the characteristic of cross-dressing, and male, obviously. And these people do have more likelihood of engaging in certain other paraphilias, because paraphilias tend to occur in clusters. So there are legitimate worries about this particular population of male persons in relation to safeguarding. It was very worrying to see the promotion, for instance, of a special police officer by one of our county police forces on Twitter the other day, who was presented wearing full face of makeup and false nails and all the rest of it, in contravention of the uniform dress code. And well done to Maya Forstatter for picking them up on that and following up with a complaint. But the idea of being pulled over by an individual appearing with a woman face mask of makeup is pretty terrifying for women, and that is because we know that is a dangerous person to be in a position where he has power over us. So I have questions. I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that somebody who's dressing in the clothes stereotypically associated with the opposite sex is a transvestite. I mean, that's what the word means. This idea that we shouldn't name the problem, we shouldn't say that this is a fetish, even if it is a fetish, is a problem. You know, who benefits from that? It is the fetishists, and it is good safeguarding to actually say this is an adult sexuality or a paraphilia, a form of not normal sexuality, and paraphilias tend to occur together, so this person has more risk of exhibiting other paraphilias, which include sadism, masochism, paedophilia, zoophilia, I forget all the others, but you know, they're all you know, non-normative sexuality. They're not directed at another adult, and there are issues. You know, who benefits from this move to say that fetishistic sexuality is normal sexuality and it should be embraced by all society? No, it shouldn't. There are very good reasons why we have social mores which disallow the public display of fetishes. I would go as far as to say that fetishes should be kept behind closed doors, but I am aware that for a lot of these men there is a wife at home, there are children at home, and they shouldn't be subject to these paraphilias either. These paraphilias need psychiatric treatment, and they need to be faced with very strong boundaries from society and within the family unit. And if the fetish is so overwhelming that it cannot be contained within the boundaries that are acceptable to the other members of society or the other members of a family, then the solution is for that individual to be ejected from the family unit, or to live in a slightly detached way from society, certainly not to be given more social power and more social position. For instance, the ability to stop and search female people at will, or to arrest them, or to detain them. This is a problem, and we need to have a really public conversation which goes into quite a lot of detail and which brings a lot of things into the light which have been previously kept hidden. And it's not going to be easy, and I'm afraid it is impossible to have that conversation without upsetting or offending anybody. There are people that are going to be upset or offended by the fact that we have to have this conversation, and I don't see any way around that. I'm sorry.
Well, the problem with this ideology, it's opened us up to this. If any man can say that I identify as a woman and demand access to women's spaces, then it's reasonable for women to be suspicious of all of us.
He's just messing with us now, isn't he?
Then it's reasonable for women to be suspicious of all of us. That's what that's women need to do that, protect their own boundaries, protect their own spaces. I understand that.
I understand that. But then what I'm trying to work out is, how do you not marginalise the person who genuinely, they might have a physical form of a man, but they might not be male.
They might have the physical form of a man, but they might not be male. It's nonsense. If you've got the physical form of a man, that's because you're a man, and there's not a lot we can do about that. That's reality, and it has become a lot more distressing for a certain population of people as they have been progressively removed from their physical bodies into a kind of intellectual playground on the internet and on message boards where they can present as whatever and whoever they like. And I would suggest that it's really, really important that we all spend more time coming back into our bodies and living in reality and understanding cycles of life and death, and understanding you know, the power of acceptance, of accepting you know, I have limitations because I have impairments because of disabilities. I can't identify out of them. I have to accept them, and I have to change the course of the life that I had planned because of it. Can't get around it. We've got to build society to account for it, not to deny it.
Male, are they still male?
What do you mean about the physical form of a man who's not male? There's two sexes. We're animals, the same as any other mammal. There's two sexes, James. There's male and there's female. Me and you are male, and the women are female.
Okay.
You know, this
all right.
is
I take a definition, because I'm going to refer to expertise which is far greater than mine, clearly. It's important to remember that being trans isn't about having a particular appearance or particular body parts. It's about something that's absolutely core to a trans person's identity and doesn't alter whatever their outward appearance might be.
Well, that's meaningless twaddle, isn't it? You know, I don't know where you got that from or whose authority that is, but it's totally meaningless. What you're doing is you're subverting the entire concept of biological sex, which is the reason why we're here. You know, it's this nonsense that's got us to the problem that we're in.
Right. So do I need to be better educated on this? Do we need to have proper conversations? And just finally to you, or do we need to go back to the people who are writing this stuff? And they are some of, I don't know, some of the charities who are there to help trans people. Maybe they're not helping them then.
We need to spend more time listening, and we need to spend more time talking to each other. One thing I usually say to people in your position, James, is who told you? Who told you this, and why did you believe them? Because we've all got a brain. We all have that common. We've all got a brain. We can all work this out for ourselves. And there are truths which we've known since the dawn of time, which have not gone away.
So the interview ends. Thank you for watching my content today. I'd really appreciate it if you could take the time to like or dislike the video. Please do subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It would be great if you would share my videos on social media, particularly on social media other than Twitter. I use Twitter a lot, at Clarity, but I'm not on other social media really. And I'll see you in the next video. Take care.